Sir, pull up! Sir, pull up! Terrain ahead!
The first officer begged. The alarms screamed. The ground rushed closer. But the captain did not act. How did a routine domestic flight end in disaster, with 152 lives lost? July 28, 2010, morning. Airblue is operating a domestic Pakistani flight from Karachi to Islamabad. The weather is extremely poor. For the last 2 weeks, heavy rains have been falling, constant low cloud cover and poor visibility. It is monsoon season in Pakistan, and floods have already swept across the country. No improvement is expected, but under certain conditions, flights can still be performed in such weather. At 7:41 in the morning, the aircraft departs from Karachi. In the left seat, a 61-year-old captain with 25,000 flight hours behind him, but only about 1,000 on the Airbus. Before that, he had worked for another airline, but there the mandatory retirement age was 60, so he had to transfer to Airblue. The first officer is 34 years old, a former F-16 fighter pilot. He has 1,800 total flight hours, with fewer than 300 of them on the Airbus. The captain decides to test his knowledge, but does so in a demeaning and even insulting manner. He is very dissatisfied with the first officer's answers, and this harassment continues for about an hour. The first officer becomes increasingly quiet. It should be noted that he was not a trainee, and this was neither a training nor a check flight. But even if it were, it would still be crucial for the instructor to build trust with the pilot being trained. Of course, questions may be asked, but if shortcomings are revealed, the instructor should simply write them down in a notebook and discuss them after the flight. Under no circumstances should the pilot being questioned be made to feel incompetent or lose confidence, because at any moment, the flight situation could suddenly become complicated and his professional help may be required. In that case, he would no longer dare to help. Islamabad has only one runway. Landing can be made from either end. Runway 30 with a heading of 296 or runway 12 with a heading of 116. The problem is that the ILS system is available only on runway 30. On the runway 12 side, there are mountains, making it impossible to install such a system. But the wind is blowing in such a way that landing must be done on runway 12. The only way to reach it is with the circle to land maneuver. For this, the aircraft must approach runway 30 on the ILS, then turn away before reaching it, circle around, and land on runway 12. And this is only possible under good weather conditions, because the maneuver can be flown only if the runway remains in constant visual contact. Pilots do not perform this procedure often, and it can be difficult for the crew. Therefore, it is decided that the captain will handle the landing. This is also logical, since during the approach the runway will be on the left, the captain's side, making it easier for him to observe. Around the airport, a visual maneuvering zone is established with a radius of 8 kilometers, about 4 miles. Inside this zone, there are no mountains, and pilots can fly safely, knowing that beneath them, there will always be at least 120 meters of clearance. It is strictly forbidden to fly outside this zone. The minimum horizontal visibility required for such an approach is 2,400 meters. But in reality, better conditions are needed, because if at any point during the maneuver the runway disappears from sight, the aircraft must immediately go around. The captain finally stops interrogating the first officer and orders him to request the weather report for Islamabad. As expected, the weather is just as bad as it was at departure. The controller confirms that the approach is cleared for runway 12. The cloud base is low. Horizontal visibility is 3,500 meters, just above the minimum of 2,400. The weather meets the minimums, but it makes the captain extremely nervous. He begins confusing Islamabad with another airport. Eventually, he starts programming the aircraft's systems for approach. But instead of the company's approved procedure, he enters his own. The captain's route passes through restricted airspace. It is wider and extends beyond the safe 8-kilometer maneuvering zone. It also creates inconvenience. The runway will end up on his right while he sits on the left. But in his opinion, his route is simpler. The first officer asks the controller if they can approach runway 12 from the left. The controller denies this because of the restricted zone and instructs them to approach from the right. This means that all the waypoints the captain created are useless. He orders the first officer to create the same waypoints on the right side of the airport. The first officer does so, but again, the route goes beyond the safe 8-kilometer zone and into the high mountains. As the aircraft continues descending along the glide path, the crew once again requests weather information and clearance for a left-side approach. The controller again repeats that a left-side approach is impossible, and they must approach from the right. The pilots set the altitude selector to 2,500 feet. This is the minimum descent altitude for the circle-to-land maneuver. It is the lowest altitude they are permitted to descend to before beginning the circling approach. At this point, the captain suddenly reaches out and changes the altitude to 2,000 feet. The first officer objects.
No, the minimum descent altitude is 2,500, as stated in the briefing.
The altitude selector is set back to 2,500 feet. The captain is eager to break the rules and descend lower because he's afraid he won't see the runway. The aircraft levels off at 2,500 feet, but the runway is still not in sight. A decision must be made. Go around or continue the approach. The controller radios that another aircraft has just successfully landed on runway 12. The pilots take this as a sign. If they managed it, then so can we. Perhaps the weather is better than it seems. But the controller does not mention that the other aircraft landed only on its third attempt, and that yet another flight had diverted to an alternate airport. Finally, the pilots spot the runway and turn right. The circle-to-land maneuver must now be flown. This time, the captain again twists the altitude selector, lowering it from 2,500 to 2,300 feet. The first officer says nothing, and the aircraft begins descending. This is a violation, since they are descending below the minimum altitude, reducing their maneuvering safety margin. The aircraft continues drifting farther from the airport and is now approaching the edge of the safe 8-kilometer zone. The captain has already lost sight of the runway. According to the rules, they must now go around. The controller urgently instructs them to turn left immediately to avoid entering mountainous terrain. In the cockpit, the warning sounds.
Terrain ahead. Pull up.
Sir, we've reached high terrain. Sir, terrain ahead. Turn left.
Normally, this warning sounds about 60 seconds before a potential collision. It should never be heard under normal circumstances. The captain becomes nervous and tense. He clearly did not expect to hear this. Stress levels rise sharply, further reducing his situational awareness. The aircraft continues flying toward the mountains, and the controller again contacts the crew.
Airblue 202, do you still have the runway in sight?
Sir, what should I tell him?
Airblue 202, do you see the ground?
Confirmed, Airblue 202, we see the ground.
But seeing the ground and seeing the runway are not the same thing.
Sir, terrain ahead.
Yes, we're turning left.
The captain turns the heading selector to the left, but the aircraft does not respond. The autopilot is flying in managed navigation mode, directly toward the waypoint KBD-11. For the aircraft to follow the heading knob, the captain needs only to pull the selector knob toward himself. But he doesn't. Under stress, the captain keeps twisting the knob left until it reaches 86 degrees. Finally, he pulls the heading selector. The aircraft begins to turn, but it turns right instead of left. Because the aircraft was on a heading of 300, to reach the commanded 86, it chooses the shortest turn to the right, and it continues flying deeper into the mountains.
Terrain ahead. Pull up.
More and more warnings fill the cockpit. When a pilot hears this, there is only one proper sequence of actions. Disconnect the autopilot. Pull the side stick fully back. Set engines to toga power. Retract speed brakes. Level the wings. If this procedure is followed, the aircraft will most likely avoid terrain. But the Pakistani crew of Flight 202 did not do this. The first officer is literally begging the captain.
Sir, turn left. Sir, pull up. Sir, pull up. Sir, pull up. Terrain, sir.
The captain makes weak attempts to avoid collision. He sets the engines to flex mode, not toga, but it still increases thrust. He dials the altitude up to 3,700 feet, and the aircraft begins climbing away from the terrain. But just a few seconds later, he reduces the selected altitude to 3,100 feet. On the hills below, people see the aircraft roaring past at low altitude. The first officer continues to beg.
Sir, pull up. Sir, pull up.
The captain keeps twisting the heading selector left, and the autopilot, choosing the shortest path, turns the aircraft to the right. Finally, something clicks with the captain. He disconnects the autopilot and pushes the side stick fully left. The aircraft rolls quickly into a steep left bank, reaching a maximum of 52 degrees. At the same time, the captain pushes the side stick forward. Combined with the steep bank, this sends the aircraft into a rapid descent, 15 meters per second. The ground is too close. A catastrophe is inevitable.
Terrain, sir. Sir, we're going down. Sir, we're going down.
15 kilometers from the airport, the aircraft crashes into the Margalla Hills. Despite the rugged terrain, mountains, forest, and heavy rain, rescuers arrive at the crash site within 45 minutes. Local hospitals switch into emergency mode, but none of the 152 people on board survive. Out of nearly 3,000 Airbus A321s built, this was the only one where passengers lost their lives due to crew error. 2 others had been destroyed in terrorist attacks. All other incidents with this aircraft type involved no fatalities. The final accident report from the Pakistani aviation authorities was one of the shortest and least complete in modern history, just 38 pages. It lacked the analysis of causes, a crucial part. For comparison, reports from the Interstate Aviation Committee often exceed 200 pages. Experts placed blame on the captain for failing to apply CRM, Crew Resource Management. Early in the flight, he had completely undermined the first officer's confidence. The crew violated every established procedure for the visual approach. This accident demonstrates how important leadership skills are when you occupy any position of authority, whether in the cockpit or in an office. In addition to teamwork, it is vital that colleagues help you and act in line with you. It is important to make them feel that they matter and that they can express their point of view regardless of the situation. If this is absent, you may end up in the same position as the captain of this flight. When something goes wrong, your team will not help you. Had there been proper interaction on this Pakistani flight, the first officer would have taken control and performed the terrain avoidance maneuver. These lessons are important not only for pilots, they are important for everyone.